John Stanko of ICGales.com, being joined by John Boyd, head coach of the Iona College women's rowing program and assistant coach of the men's team as well. John, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you being flexible and joining us in your mobile office.
Thank you. Yes, busy day.
Well, obviously things have been busy for you. The students are back. You're driving around all over the place as well. So what's it been like for you and your wife, head coach of the men's program, getting back in the swing of things with the student athletes training and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's been fun so far. It's been a little complicated at times, but that's the message that we've just been preaching to the squad. That just to be flexible, expect the unexpected, and every day is just going to be its new challenge. And so the message has been to everybody just to stay water, be flexible with the messaging that you hear from us. They're getting used to the ramped up testing that we're doing right now. We're testing our program 3 days a week, which is cool. I think some of the athletes were a little scared of having to do 3 tests a week, but they know that it's for their safety so that they can go out there and do what it is that they want to do, which is, have a college experience and enjoy some competition this spring.
Yeah, I think credit to Iona for getting that 3 days a week training. Your nose does get acclimated to the testing after a couple of weeks of it. So the student athletes will get used to it. You mentioned kind of being flexible and being adaptable, and that for your program is interesting because you have to blend training between the rowing tank and then also being at the boathouse and those 2 different avenues. So how have you and the programs kind of adapted to that here in the early weeks and going to continue doing so going forward?
Yeah, I mean, our on-campus facilities are actually really, really great. We're one of the few teams on campus that actually can claim their own space, which is really huge. So it allows us to train. We have a lot of new people that need to learn the rowing stroke. So it gives us a space where we can do that uninterrupted. And quite frankly, it allows us to, stay away from, the rest of the madness of the athletic department right now, where everyone's trying to figure out field time and court time. And so it's one less headache in that regard. But the rowing tank is something that we tend to use more this time of year, just when the weather is pretty bad, in terms of temperature. But we've been actually out there rowing a little bit this February. We've been dodging the ice storms and the snowstorms, but we're getting out there when we can. But right now the tank is being used mostly to bring up our less experienced rowers right now. So it's a safe environment where they can learn how to handle the oar. It's always 70 and sunny in there. And by the time we can really hit the water on a more full-time basis, which is usually it's around March 1st is when we're going out there, they're far more advanced than you realize they're going to be by the time you get to the water, because suddenly they kind of have the basics down. And then it's just a matter of blending what they've learned indoors to actually learning how to move a boat. So it's one thing to know how to take a stroke in the tank, but then it's another thing completely to apply that to a real world situation and move a vessel using your power and stamina.
What is the hardest part of that kind of mind switch of being indoors training to then going out to the boat? You obviously have experience in both. So when you look at the student athletes, what's the one thing you tell them going, this is going to be the hardest part for you to kind of learn and realize and getting used to actually being out on the water?
It's literally the teamwork, I think, having to work literally with other people. And sometimes, your teammates, depending on where you're sitting in the boat, your teammates could be 45, 50 feet away from you, and you have to work with that person. In the rowing tank, there's not a lot of consequence for, doing the wrong thing on your rowing stroke or even getting out of time, because the rowing tank doesn't go anywhere. But in the boat, you have to literally work together so that you can work. It's the greatest team sport for that reason, because if you're not doing exactly the same thing as your teammates, then you're literally not going to go anywhere. And that's why in our sport, it's hard to pinpoint any real stars, because if you stand out, you're probably doing something wrong.
That's a great point. I never thought of that. Well, again, I think part of the adjustments is that Glen Island Park, where your boathouse is located, has been a site for COVID testing. So obviously during the winter months and even now still is still being a testing site. how's that kind of adjusted the schedule that you guys have had this year, both in terms of practice, but also in terms of meets that you would normally host in New Rochelle?
Yeah, it's definitely been a major obstacle for us this year. In March, the National Guard moved in and set up a tent within hours, and our season came to an end. And naively, we thought it would be gone by the time the school year started up again in August, but that hasn't been the case. And now it looks like the facility will probably be around at least through fall of 2021. So when we started training in the fall, we actually didn't really have access to Glen Island Park. We didn't have access to the boathouse. We had to work extra hard with the county to ensure access. And, we just had a lot of hoops that we had to jump through. So our water time this fall was extremely limited and pretty much non-existent, actually. So our workouts were primarily land-based. So we were doing lots of running, rowing on the ergs out on the soccer field, and riding bikes and that kind of stuff, which works for our sport because we really are a work sport. It's more about, general fitness and becoming the best athlete you can. So, but I think it's really a credit to the kids on the program to stick with it for an entire fall semester, and they didn't get a chance to enjoy the best part, which was being on the water. So it's a really credit to them to stick with it, trust in the process, and continue to train. And then to your other point about the regattas, yeah, that hurts too, because we have a really great venue that we can host races on. We have a 6-lane Olympic-sized course. It was a fine rowing course back in its day. It hosted Olympic trials and national championships and world trials, throughout the 70s and into the 80s. And so it really is a really great venue to host races. It's logistically easy to get to and run a regatta, but this year we just can't get it. We can't invite anybody down. It's just too complicated to do that. So Iona Rowing is going to be on the road all year round. And I think that's probably the first time that's ever happened for us.
I think one of the craziest things is that the Metropolitan Championships have been hosted quite frequently. And I think you said for almost 50 years plus, they've been hosted at Glen Island Boathouse. They've been hosting in New Rochelle. And unfortunately this year with COVID and the various circumstances, the Met Championships just aren't happening for the Gaels. Just talk about kind of the history you have with that event. You raced in that event, you coached in that event now multiple times, and to know that this year it's not happening, obviously for circumstances nobody could have predicted, but for you, it's got to be kind of personal. It's going to be tough for the student athletes to not be able to race in that this year.
Yeah, it's a good event. It's usually a pretty decent predictor for what we can expect, come for the Dad Vale Regatta on the men's side and the MAC Championship on the women's side. Oftentimes you'll see some of those competitors actually, before you get to the race. So it's a good way to fine tune your speed. But yeah, that's a regatta that's been a staple on a lot of local programs for, like you said, several decades now. 1964 was the first time we hosted that race, and we've held it every year since. So this will be 2 years in a row where we don't get to have it. But hopefully in 2022, we come back stronger, put together an even better event for everybody who's used to coming to that race. And, that's it. That's all we can hope for.
Well, it's not all terrible news for you personally this year. I got to give credit to you. You were appointed to the New York State Collegiate Rowing Association Board of Directors, which is obviously a fine achievement for yourself. So I guess kind of talk about the process of getting onto that board of directors and now what it can mean, not only for yourself as the head coach of Iona, but also kind of for rowing in general in terms of New York State and how you're looking forward to working with everyone.
Yeah, it's been a fun experience so far. It's the first board I've ever been on in any kind. So it's kind of fun to kind of learn what that process is about, and also kind of getting in the room, a virtual room with some really respected head coaches in the region, Division 3, 2, and Division 1 coaches, and some club team coaches out there too. So it's really cool to, kind of pick their brain and learn and produce a really good regatta. They approached me basically, it was a strategic move on their part. Iona hasn't been to that regatta in many years, and they want to get us back. And it's mutual too, because I've had my eye on going back to that regatta anyway. That's something that I competed in my 4 years here, and it's a good regatta. It's got a lot of strong competition in there, and I think we need to reintroduce Iona rowers to that level of competition going forward. So 2021 it's not really going to happen for us again, but we look to be there in 2022 with our squads.
Well, again, I think working through this year, there's a lot of contingencies and loopholes that you've had to jump through. But obviously, a season is happening. You guys start against Stockton University. A season is going to happen, which is going to culminate with the MAC championships for the women and the Dadvale Regatta for the men. So I just kind of in a broad sense, how do you plan out and schedule out the training to make sure that the Gaels and the student athletes are ready for when the season starts? Because once it starts, it's going to be a sprint until the championship season, until those two big races.
Yeah, it's tricky because of the blend of experience that we have with our team right now. So all the athletes who have been with us for, at least 1 year, they know the deal. Like, this is a work sport. The training never ends. When we're on our breaks, you're out there running, you're out there, hitting the erg, and, just staying fit is the idea, following Kelly Shaver's, lift plan. Like, that's really, going to be vital to their success. And then for the less experienced kids, it's just about teaching them the sport. That's what's really unique about our sport, is that you can pick it up, but it just takes a little bit of time to learn. So it's a blend between, those two endeavors. And we're not the only ones in that situation anyway. So it's going to be kind of fun to, see what Stockton puts together, what Manhattan puts together, and Sacred Heart and all that. And it's going to be interesting. We're excited to obviously just get back on the water on April 3rd in a race. But our team is just so young, and a lot of them have not even had a college race yet because they were beginners last year and we didn't get the opportunity to compete once last year. So, we have a bunch of sophomores and even a couple juniors who haven't even competed on the collegiate level yet. So there's a lot of lessons that need to be learned. You could do all the training in the world, but until you actually get next to somebody and you line up and somebody says go, that's where the education really begins in our sport. And so we got to go through that.
Well, I think those butterflies of that first time, of that first race and that first regatta are going to be exciting for everyone involved. Head coach John Boyd, thanks for taking the time this afternoon. We'll let you get back to your mobile workstation and see you on campus soon.
All right. Thank you very much, John.